let's get into it
and get the conversation started.
Welcome to Inspired Men Talk,
A podcast where we sit down with real people and talk about their journey,
the stuff they've been through, the bits that shaped them.
and the moments where things started to change,
We talk about men's mental health.
but in a way that actually sounds like real life.
Some of it's serious,
And some of it is a little bit lighter,
but it's always honest and brave.
because most of this stuff doesn't get talked about enough.
And if there's one thing we've seen time and time again,
Is that there's always a way back.
so I'm Gary,
And I'm Peter.
and this is Inspired Men Talk. Welcome to another episode of Inspired Men Talk. As always, we've got Peter with us. Peter is one of our team, and we've got a great guest today, which is Paul, who's quite a big name in Peterborough, if Peterborough has a big name. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, Peter was quite a long name. It's a lot of letters.
Yeah.
So, I'm Paul Stainton. Some people probably know me from nightclub days in the 80s and 90s, DJed at Shanghai Sam's and Fifth Avenue. I was on Hereward Radio for about 4 years, sports editor at Radio Cambridgeshire, editor and reporter at 5 Live, TV sports correspondent for the 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock news. Came back to Peterborough, the breakfast show, was editor of the Peterborough office, presented the mid-morning show. Then I left to run my own company, and now I'm head of marketing and communications at Peterborough Cathedral, and we're trying our very best to keep that building alive and make it viable, and at the same time drive footfall into the city centre, which is very, very much needed. So, I've had quite a varied career, from DJing to broadcasting to communications.
Cool. So you were kind enough to send us a really detailed bio. And interestingly, one, you're not from Peterborough, and two, you're not from entertainment originally. So that was quite a big shift.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the pit villages of South Yorkshire around Doncaster. I was born in Goole, furthest inland port in Great Britain.
Oh.
You need to know that. And the reason I was in Goole because my granddad came over to build the Aire and Calder Canal from Ireland. So I'm, 10 parts Irish, which explains the temper that I sometimes used to show, but don't anymore. So, no, I grew up in Pit Village in South Yorkshire. I struggled at school, not struggled at school, but I struggled to engage with school. I loved English. I loved music, even though I couldn't play an instrument. And I knew I wanted to do something with music when I left school. But my dad had other ideas, because go and get a job, son. And, even though I did really well in English at school and my English teacher wanted me to stay on and go to do A-levels, my dad said no, so I had to get a job. And I ended up banging tin at British Aerospace for a couple of years, which I hated. And it's easy to say, because when I was there at the time, I used to look at the people on what they call the tinner's balcony, and I used to be filing off bits of exhaust for tornadoes, and I was rubbish at it, because I'd start talking and I'd be filing off too much, and then someone else would catch my eye and I'd bang something. So I was awful at it, and in the end I quit. My dad chased me around the garden.
Jesus. Wasn't that something like British Aerospace? Wasn't that considered a job for life? If you get an apprenticeship with them, it was like gold dust.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and to be fair, I did okay at school in the end, because I did a lot of work at home, because I was the class clown as well. So I couldn't do it. Do you know what I mean? I couldn't do work at school. I had to do it at home in secret almost, and then just hand it in. And so I got 3 O-levels, and I got a lot of CSEs, as they were then. So I had an offer of, I think, 3 or 4 jobs. I could have worked at Goole Shipyard. I could have worked at what was the YEB, Yorkshire Electricity Board. I'd have been rubbish at that as well. And I had British Aerospace. And yeah, you're right, it was a job for life. And that was the difficulty, because my dad had been working in various pits around South Yorkshire. We used to move quite a lot. I think I had 12 schools and 10 houses, something like that. So you just get the wood chip off, and it'd be running down your arm in all the water, and then we're moving again.
But back in them days, wasn't it about putting the wood chip on?
Well, yeah, you go back. So you take it off, and you put some more wood chip back on anyway. So it's wallpaper for those that are too young. So yeah, my upbringing was very poor. We had no carpets upstairs. You had a back burner behind the fire. You didn't have central heating. In the winter, it was very cold. And I distinctly remember us living off my dad's allotment, really, because my dad didn't work a lot. He didn't like to work too much, which is why I think I've got my work ethic now, because I always wanted to be better than him.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant.
And aspire to be bigger and better and do better in life and not struggle in that way, a self-imposed struggle, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it drove me to get out of that situation, but still on that tinner's balcony at British Aerospace, after about 18 months, I thought, I've got to get out of here, but how? How do I get out of here? And I'm getting up at 3:45 in the morning because I lived in Bridlington and catching a bus to go to. So it was brutal, and I'm 16, 17 and going out Thursday, Friday, Saturday night.
Yeah.
So I was never at work on a Friday very often,
That's what you do when you're young, right? It's that whole 24-hour drinking culture, no sleep, getting back on it. And
and that's your time, because you can't do it when you're 35. You've got commitments,
Yeah, of course. And you also mentioned then, again, in that bio, and thank you for sharing that with us, that you had a couple of things that kind of came out of the blue, because when you described it, I went into TV, I went into radio, I was DJing. It sounds like a really smooth flow of career, right? But actually the bio shows us that it's not. So do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of some of the ups and downs in there?
So, I mean, I'll go back to that tinner's balcony at Brough, because I was stood there and I was getting more and more demoralised, and people from Goole are not well liked by people from Hull. And I had a bit of a gob on me then, and I'd always be cracking gags there was a couple of bouncers from a nightclub in Hull that worked on the balcony, and they'd always be giving it some, and I'd give it back, and they'd catch me in the lift, and you get some of that, but I was getting really, really fed up with it, and to the point I'd had enough. My granddad, bless his cotton socks, bless his soul, he said, I can see how unhappy you are. Would you like me to back you in getting a taxi in Bridlington? And bless his cotton socks, he set me off with this. He had a little bit of money and he guaranteed me a taxi plate in Bridlington. Bear in mind, I was only 18. And I started driving my own taxi in Bridlington. Right at the time, all the tourists didn't come anymore. But it got me out of there and it allowed me to quit. And then I got involved in hospital radio because one of the taxi drivers did hospital radio. And so I did a show, the Blonde on Sunday show it was called, all about me. Not anymore. And luckily, the taxi driver that told me about hospital radio also did mobile discos. So then I used to do Saturday nights for him and get paid 20 quid, I think it was.
Yeah.
And he lent me his old Vauxhall Viva. It had very little floor in it. You could see the road, and you'd hump the speakers in the back and the double decks, and you'd be going to all these places around the North York Wolds, and you'd go, and it'd be lovely sunshine, and you'd come out at like 12:15, and it's thick fog. You couldn't see 3 foot ahead of you. So, but brilliant times. But that's what got me started. So getting the taxi, meeting the taxi driver, hospital radio, DJing, and then comparing a summer show, what they called Leisure World in Bridlington. And then from there I went DJing.
So the question I've got is to take on, I mean, clearly you passed your test at by the time you was 18. So that,
yeah. It's the first time, 17. It's the first time.
Wow.
Me too.
Yeah. Not now, I don't think, but...
No, I don't think any of us should take a test now.
No.
But to take on your own taxi business, for a better word, and even DJing at 18, that's a lot of confidence. That's a lot of self-confidence, self-esteem even. Considering where you came from, what was your driver?
It was that drive that I've talked about my father. I don't know whether he didn't want to go to work or but if he had a job, he had it for 3 days or 5 days. And then he'd come home, he'd have a asthma attack, and then he wouldn't go back. And that used to drive me crazy. I used to think, life could be so much better if you just kept a job. My mum worked 3-4 jobs sometimes. I mean, bless her, God rest her soul, and she kept a happiness about her. He was a nasty piece of work, my dad.
Yeah.
And lazy. It drove me. And the other thing that drove me was, I know what it's like to be skint. And when I say skint, I mean broke.
Yeah.
I used to go round our villages when I was younger with little boxes full of my dad's produce from the allotment and sell it He'd send me out to sell his produce. So I'd be knocking on doors saying, yeah, it's 3p for a lettuce, but he didn't know that I'd put them up. I'd make the lettuce 3.5p. So by the time I'd sold the whole box, I've got 5p for myself, which doesn't sound a lot, but back then,
big money, big money.
It was a bag of, I can remember getting a bag of chips for 5 pence.
What, 2.5p for a bag of chips and scraps when I was a kid?
Yeah, I come from London. We're a little bit
I remember
posher.
watching John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John summer nights on the telly in the chip shop when they were number one, and getting a bag of scraps for 2.5p, because that's all I had. But anyway, going back to what you said. So the drive comes from that, knowing what it's like to be completely broke and skint, and having that work ethos and that drive to be better than your forebears. So when you say it was a lot of self-esteem and confidence to drive a taxi, to compare a summer show for 49 nights on the trot. Wow. I listened to a band destroy Wind Beneath My Wings 49 consecutive nights. They were, and I'll tell you what they were called. They were called Schooner, and they were the club band of the year, but they were bloody awful. And people have said to me down the years, you mentioned self-confidence. People have said to me down the years, oh, you're a big head. You're full of it. And I say to them, the best people and the people, I think, who do stuff, and you need a certain confidence to be able to do it. You need a certain confidence to stand in front of 1,000 people, or as I used to at Shanghai Sam's, 1,200 people, or 2,000 people at Black Orchid at nightclub in Nottingham. And to command that space, takes self-confidence. It borders on arrogance sometimes, and, I can be accused of being arrogant in my 20s, and I'll take that on the chin, and I'll say sorry. But you need that drive, you need that self-esteem, you need that confidence.
I think confidence is massively misjudged, because I think arrogance can be a problem for people, and they quite often show arrogance to hide their faults. But genuine confidence and genuine self-esteem where, do you know what, I belong here, I've earned this, and I'm really happy to be here, is different to the arrogance where people put a front on because actually they're waiting to be caught out. So but I tend to have that. I know you're driven by, I don't want to be like that, but to have that knowledge in yourself, that complete understanding of who you wanted to be or who you didn't want to be more like, that's quite big for most 18-year-olds, I think.
Yeah, and I think I decided early on, probably 10, 11, this, living in a pit village in South Yorkshire was not a life for me. This sounds arrogant. I felt different. Do you know what I mean? To the kids who lived in my village, I felt like I could entertain people. I could make people smile. I could make them feel warm. And I always had that at school. I could always make a room erupt in disarray or make people smile. And I've always looked to make people smile. And I think I enjoy that. I miss it a bit now. I miss the radio a bit because I've never laughed so much in my life as the last 10 years on the radio with producer Ben. We had wonderful times and great listening figures, and at local radio when it was at its peak, I think. And I miss that sometimes, but I still have a crack. I still make people laugh at the cathedral.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, no, it's a big one for me. I like the thing about the whole 49 nights of being able to go through that. I did the Edinburgh Festival a couple of times. I used to do stand-up comedy. And you're right. If you watch someone and they're bad, you've got to watch them for 20 days. And it's really hard. It can be really hard work, and it can almost derail you.
Yeah, we had some nice dancers as well. So I watched them as well for 49 nights. But yeah, my job was to sort of keep them in. So the crowd would come in for the early part of the show. Then I would DJ for an hour. Didn't really DJ. I used to wander around the audience taking the mickey out of everybody and say, "Oh, lovely jacket. Did your wife choose it for you?" And all that sort of stuff. Just wander around the audience, but keep them in for the late show. So you had a real job. If you had 700 people in an auditorium, I had an hour to keep them. And you learn quick. I tell you now, you learn quick.
That was a long time in that scenario, isn't it?
Yeah. And nobody's telling you what to do. They're just saying, go on, Paul.
Yeah.
And again, somebody had seen me DJing at a different place in Bridlington and offered me that gig because he'd seen how I interacted with kids. So I used to do before I went to Leisure World, I used to do a summer thing with kids, and families would come and we'd play games and corners and, stand still, and you couldn't do this now. And I'd walk around the dance floor and, don't move, and tickle them, which you can't touch kids these days, obviously.
Yeah.
But back then it was, it was a different time it was, wasn't it? Because Mr. Savile was doing all them other things.
Yeah.
It wasn't. Yeah, there's the height, there's the profile, because that's my childhood, right? I remember that. That's my childhood, and they were great days. They were great fun. And yeah, okay, some things went on, but that's not everybody. So I mean, we can't tar everyone with the same brush, and I don't think we can and should. But let's move on a little bit and say, okay, you went from that leisure world place and you started moving more into the DJing side and the sports side. Tell us a little bit about that, because it sounds glamorous, right? From someone on the outside, it sounds a bit glamorous.
Well, I'll tell you now, it wasn't. The interesting thing was the band who played, the drummer, I told him I was a bit fed up because when I wasn't comparing, I was like assistant stage manager. So you're painting the stage and all this. I didn't want to do that. So I'd said to the drummer in the band, if you see anything, I'm interested in leaving. And this is chance and fate and, sliding doors. And when you've got no commitments. And he phoned me up one day and he said, there's a nightclub in Leeds looking for a DJ. I said, brilliant. I applied, went to Leeds. Bear in mind, I'd never mixed a record together in my life. So, when you're DJing, you can mix records together, beat match. I'd never done it. So I just went and bluffed my way through it and used my voice because I was always good on the mic and I could do all that. And I was just chopping records into each other. And the guy said, yeah, you've got the job. You've got a great personality, blah, blah, blah. And then I went up to Middlesbrough where they had another club and he taught me how to mix. And then I went to Newcastle, Newcastle. Whatever you play at midnight is a scrap. But, great times. I remember one of the bar staff, because I was staying. This is the other thing. It was such a punt, by the way, because my mum and dad had divorced at that point.
Right.
And my mum was with a new man. And I won't have a go at my mum because she was lovely to me growing up. But at that time, she didn't want me coming home. So I took this punt to go and work for this company where you stayed in their houses. So if I got sacked, I would have been on the street. I'd have been on the streets. And I never thought, at the time, I just thought, oh, big shiny thing, go for it. And I remember being in a B&B in Newcastle, the company were paying for. I got a knock on the door. There's a knock on the door at 5:15. And it was one of the bar staff. I said, I'm not at work till 9 o'clock. And she went, no, get dressed. It's trebles for doubles at O'Hannigan's. I went, what? And we went trebles for doubles at about 10 different bars until 9:15. And my first night DJing at Madison, Newcastle, I was hammered. And that is Newcastle for you. They love a drink.
I go there regular.
Yeah. And I remember going back years ago when I was working for TV and when Bobby Robson was Newcastle manager, he used to make me a little cup of tea, bless him. He was a lovely old boy. And I remember going back and sort of reminiscing and seeing all the girls, open-toed sandals, -10.
Yeah.
Little flimsy tops and thinking.
Hasn't changed.
Great place. It's a
all
great place.
orange. I love
They're
it.
great
I love
people. They're
Newcastle.
great people. Yeah.
I do love
so
them.
that's how the DJing started, really. I worked for this company, but it was, again, I think back now, I think, so close. And that's why when I look at people on the streets and people have a go at homeless people, I think, hold on a minute, mate. Come on. You're one or two steps from that. Everybody is.
Yeah.
Keep it in your head. Keep it in your head.
And I think it's another good example of your confidence, though, right? To not even be thinking about that at the time. Oh, no, if I lose my job, I'm going to be out. Just to be going, yeah, this is great. Well, I'm just going to have so much fun. So I think that's really nice. Yeah,
confidence, cockiness, arrogance. I mean,
Youth.
When I came to Peterborough, it did go to my head for 6 months. Everybody wants to take your picture. Everybody wants to be with you. I got a bit too cocky, but I reined it in. I met my wife. She reined me in.
It's interesting because I think I came to Peterborough. Well, I started in Peterborough in early 79 to 85 in the Air Force and moved into Peterborough in 85. Hereward Radio was the big radio station.
Yeah, 24% share. So 24% of people in Peterborough listened. Everybody had a car sticker. It was amazing.
Yeah, and everybody read the ET.
Yeah, they did. Yeah,
it doesn't. I don't think it exists now.
There's still a few printed copies, but they don't sell many online.
It was huge, and they were. I used to listen to it a lot, and it was a bit of a local thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
You must have really freighted or jumped onto that wave and felt quite. Because Peterborough.
Yeah, but it took a while, Gary. I didn't just jump on it. I mean, I was DJing I'd left Nottingham by that point and acid house parties behind, illegal raves as we used to call them, but they were fun. And I'd come to Peterborough, so I worked at Shanghai's. Then I left there to go to Fifth Avenue, and I was working there, but I'd always had this yearning to go back and do radio because I'd done it in Bridlington. And, again, confident. I thought, I'm pretty good at that. And I rang the station controller, a gentleman called Adrian Crooks. I rang him every week for a year and said, if anything comes up, can you give me a job? If anything comes up, can you give me a chance? I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I've done this, I've done that. And there was one, and I'll forever be grateful to Kev Lawrence for this.
Yeah.
There was one Friday night that Kev Lawrence was doing drive time on Hereward Radio, and he got a job on the South Coast. I think it was at somewhere like Ocean Sound, and he just didn't turn up for his shift. So they had to fill it. So there was nobody to do the Friday night dance show. So I got a call at like 4:00 saying, can you do the dance show at 7:00? I thought, well, I'm supposed to be DJing tonight. So I got cover for the DJ in the nightclub, and I took my box of records and did a Friday night dance show. And I was never off the radio. I did Friday nights. Then I was around when they needed somebody for drive time. And I learned on the job, really, because I had a thick Yorkshire accent back then as well. I don't know why would you put me on the radio in Peterborough? I was, thick Yorkshire accent. I've got a tape of it somewhere.
Was Stuart Farnes there at the time?
He was, bless him. Yeah, he and me and him, we've done quite a few things together over the years. Bless him, and he's not with us anymore. But he gave me a shot. He signed it off, and I remember the day I left actually to go to the BBC, and I went to see him in his office. I said, I've got something to tell you. You want Saturdays off to play cricket, don't you? And I said, no, mate, I'm leaving. I'm off to the BBC. And that was right at the point when they were taken over by GWR, then Heart, and and they were bringing cue cards in, and you can only say this, and you can only speak 3 times an hour. And I'm like, I've got an audience. I had a 22% share audience at 11 till 2:00 in the afternoon. You're telling me how to broadcast to them? I don't think so.
No.
When you look now, Radio Cambridge has got a 8% share all day.
Yeah.
It's interesting, your story about the persistent phone calls. It reminded me of a friend of mine who went to the Comedy Store, the King Gong show, and he made his 5 minutes and phoned the guy every Friday. Every Friday at 10 in the morning, he would phone him and go, have you got a spot for me? Have you got a spot for me? Have you got a spot for me? So much so that Friday at 10 o'clock, as the phone rang, the guy would pick it up and go, hi, Will, how are you?
Mm.
Yeah, I'm good. Have you got a spot for me? And he got his spot, right? And that persistence works. Yeah. And it clearly did for you. And I guess, what was the driver behind that? What helped you in the face of a year of rejection to keep going forward?
Because I'd done a similar thing with the PT, and I'd managed to get a column out of them looking at all the new music every week. And I never got paid for it, but I thought, well, it's good exposure, I'll do it anyway. And I remember doing that and thinking, well, I could, and I was at that age, I thought, I could do anything I want. I could do anything. It's that confidence of trusting in your own ability as well, and not being afraid of rejection, not being afraid. And that's what I'd say to people. You mustn't be afraid of people saying no, because they will. But what if they say yes? So that was always my ethos, and it always has been my ethos with everything I've ever done, really. And to get that yes, to get that call after all that is so rewarding. And then you start thinking, I don't know what I'm doing. And I have to thank another gentleman who's not with us anymore, called John Collin, who was my lighting jock at Shanghai's and Fifth Avenue, but he was also an engineer at Hereward, and he helped me through the first drive time show, because we used to have cassettes for all the adverts, and it was across 3 stations. So it was across Hereward, ENFM, I think it was then, in Cambridge, and KLFM in Kings Lynn.
Yes.
And all the adverts were different. So all different lengths, and all finished at different times. So you had to put fillers in, 5-second fillers, and you had to fill these cart. And I remember filling all the cart machines up, getting all the adverts right, and going, "Whoa, I've done it!" And John saying, "Have you queued up your next record?" And I went, "Oh God, no!" Put the next CD in, So I've bullshitted a lot. I've flown by the seat of my pants, but I've never felt I couldn't eventually do it, whatever it was.
Yeah.
That's
That
amazing.
self-belief again, just like whether I can or I can't, I will.
Yeah.